What just happened on live TV left viewers stunned. In a moment no one saw coming, Joyce Meyer broke into tears and delivered an announcement that silenced the entire studio. Fans were confused, critics were shocked, and the internet exploded within seconds. What pushed her to this emotional breaking point, and why did it unfold on air in real time? The truth behind this shocking moment is far more dramatic than anyone expected. For years, Joyce Meyer was a name almost everyone in Christian circles recognized. She wasn't just a preacher, she was a force. With her bold voice, straightforward messages, and deeply personal stories, she stood out in a world where many church leaders played it safe. People admired her honesty, her strength, and the way she turned her own painful past into something powerful. She talked about trauma, abuse, and brokenness in a way that made people feel seen. That's why millions tuned into her broadcasts, read her books, and came to her conferences. She gave people hope, not just in God, but in the idea that they too could overcome anything. But recently, that image started to crack. Her emotional breakdown on live television took everyone by surprise. One moment she was sitting confidently, as she always had, and the next, tears. Real, raw, and impossible to hide. Then came the words no one expected. She was stepping down, just like that. After decades of being one of the most influential women in Christian media, she was walking away, and she wasn't doing it quietly. In her voice, you could hear exhaustion, not just physical tiredness, but emotional weight, the kind that builds over years of stress, pressure, and trying to hold everything together while the world watches. She didn't give many details in her announcement. She didn't mention the scandals, the lawsuits, the headlines, but she didn't have to. Her face said it all. This wasn't just a personal decision. It felt like the end of a long battle, one she'd been fighting behind the scenes for far too long. For many who had followed her for years, it was heartbreaking. This wasn't the confident, unshakable Joyce they remembered. This was a woman who looked like she'd finally reached her limit. And while some were quick to judge, others saw a human being, someone who gave everything to her ministry, but maybe lost herself along the way. Her fall from grace wasn't sudden. It was slow, messy, and public. And now, the woman who once stood as a pillar of strength was stepping off the stage, not with anger, but with tears. Joyce Meyer didn't just build a ministry, she built an empire. What started as a few small Bible studies and speaking events in local churches turned into one of the biggest names in Christian media. Over the years, her name became almost a brand in itself. There were books, TV shows, conferences, radio programs, podcasts, and a strong social media presence. Millions of people around the world were tuning in daily, buying her materials, and donating to her ministry. To many, she wasn't just a preacher, she was a lifeline. But behind all the encouragement and inspiration, something else was growing. Power, money, and eventually, controversy. As the ministry expanded, so did the wealth. Joyce Meyer Ministries reportedly took in hundreds of millions of dollars in donations over the years. The message that God wants you to be blessed resonated with many. People gave believing they were helping to spread the gospel and support good causes. But as the money poured in, questions started to surface. Reports began to emerge that much of the ministry's funds weren't going to the poor, or to outreach, or to building new churches, but were instead being used to support an extremely lavish lifestyle. Photos showed Joyce flying in a private jet. She owned a multi-million-dollar mansion. She wore designer clothes and expensive jewelry. There were luxury cars, high-end hotel stays, and first-class everything. For someone preaching about faith and sacrifice, the lifestyle seemed far removed from the message. And that's when the real criticism started. People began asking, is this truly a ministry? Or is it a business wrapped in religious language? Former employees started to speak out. Some described the working environment inside the organization as strict and controlling. A few even called it toxic. They claimed that Joyce demanded absolute loyalty and that questioning leadership or finances could get you pushed out fast. According to those insiders, anyone who raised concerns about how the money was being spent, especially on luxuries, wasn't around for long. Donors who had once been proud to support the ministry started to wonder where their money was really going. Some had given large amounts, even when they couldn't afford it, because they believed Joyce's message, give generously, and God will bless you. But those blessings didn't always come, at least not in the way they had hoped. Meanwhile, the woman they trusted was living in a level of wealth most of them would never experience. And it wasn't just the lifestyle that raised eyebrows. There were deeper concerns about the way Scripture was being used. Joyce Meyer, like many other televangelists, has been connected to what's known as the prosperity gospel. It's the belief that faith, especially when combined with giving, leads to financial success. The idea is that if you believe hard enough, pray boldly enough, and support the ministry faithfully enough, God will bless you with abundance. To struggling believers, this can sound like hope, but to critics, and to Joe Rogan, who's been vocal about these kinds of ministries, it sounds more like a manipulation. Give money, and God will reward you. That promise has led many to give what they don't have, expecting a miracle in return. But for some, that miracle never comes. And when it doesn't, it's not the preacher who suffers. It's the person who now feels poorer, confused, and maybe even ashamed. As time went on, the ministry was hit with more serious trouble. Lawsuits began to appear. One of the most damaging accusations came from a former donor who claimed their money, which was supposed to go toward humanitarian efforts, was actually being used to fund Joyce's luxurious lifestyle. If proven true, that would mean the ministry wasn't just misleading people. It was possibly misusing funds in a way that crossed legal lines. Inside sources said that even Joyce's family and close allies were growing concerned. The organization had always been family-run, with her children and husband holding major roles. But tension reportedly started to rise. Some said her family members wanted her to step down, not just to protect the ministry's future, but to protect themselves from what was quickly becoming a public relations disaster. Meanwhile, more and more people were turning against her. Critics, former followers, even some in the Christian world who had once supported her, were now keeping their distance. Other big-name preachers like Kenneth Copeland and John Hagee, who had once stood beside her, were no longer doing so publicly. It was like the Christian media world saw the storm coming and didn't want to be dragged into it. And yet, through all this, Joyce remained mostly silent. She didn't go on air to defend herself in detail. She didn't offer long explanations or counterattacks. She made a few general statements about being blessed and misunderstood, but she didn't dive into the specifics. And for many people, that silence spoke volumes, because when serious accusations are made and the person at the center refuses to fully respond, it's hard not to wonder what's really going on behind the curtain. The empire she built stood tall for decades, but now it seemed to be cracking. The woman who once inspired millions was now surrounded by doubt, criticism, and legal questions. The wealth, once a symbol of success, had become a red flag, and the ministry that once claimed to help people find peace was now seen by some as a machine designed to make one person rich. This is what Joe Rogan and others call out as dangerous. Not because they hate religion, but because they believe leadership should come with responsibility, especially spiritual leadership. When someone claims to speak for God, when they ask for donations in the name of faith, when they tell people that giving will change their lives, then they should be held to a high standard. They should live modestly, serve others, and stay transparent. For Joyce Meyer, the empire she created may have started with good intentions, and it's true. She helped a lot of people along the way. Her messages brought comfort, her story inspired strength, and her voice made people feel understood. But somewhere along the line, the focus seemed to shift. The ministry grew, the money rolled in, and the line between faith and fame got blurry. Now, with her resignation, that empire stands at a crossroads. Some still believe in her, others have turned away for good, and the rest, they're watching closely, waiting to see if this was just a fall or the final chapter. There was a time when Joyce Meyer stood shoulder to shoulder with some of the biggest names in Christian media. She wasn't just respected, she was admired, even envied, for how far she had come. From small church gatherings to sold-out arenas, best-selling books, and a global television audience, Joyce had become a household name. She shared the stage with other powerful preachers like Kenneth Copeland, John Hagee, and T.D. Jakes. For years, she was one of the pillars of the modern televangelist world, part of a tight inner circle of faith leaders who dominated Christian TV, radio, and conferences. But as the controversies began to pile up around her, something strange started happening. Those same voices, once loud in their support, started going quiet. At first, it was subtle. Fewer mentions, less praise. Some skipped her conferences. Others stopped inviting her to theirs. Over time, it became more obvious. People in the Christian broadcasting world were pulling away. There were no official statements, no dramatic public breaks, just a slow, careful distancing. And for someone as visible and connected as Joyce Meyer, that silence was loud. Behind the scenes, rumors swirled. People close to the industry whispered about growing tension, disagreements about leadership, and disputes over money. Some said Meyer had clashed with other preachers about her financial decisions. Others suggested that people didn't want to be caught in the middle of her growing list of scandals. The lawsuits, the spending accusations, the angry former employees. In a world where image is everything, even one scandal is risky. And Joyce had more than one. As the media began digging deeper into her ministry's finances, as headlines exposed luxury homes, private jets, and angry donors, her once solid relationships started to crumble. Former allies, pastors she had mentored or collaborated with for years, simply stopped showing up. They didn't defend her. They didn't reach out publicly. In many cases, they acted as if she was no longer part of their world. The message was clear. Joyce Meyer had become a liability. And it wasn't just big-name pastors. Even within her own audience, cracks began to form. Longtime supporters who had followed her for decades started to question her. Social media was filled with people asking hard questions. Why won't she respond to the accusations? Where is the money really going? Has she lost touch with her own message? People who had once given her the benefit of the doubt, who had believed her when she said the wealth was just a blessing from God, were starting to change their minds. For many, it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about trust, and trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully rebuild. Inside her ministry, there were also signs of trouble. Sources close to Joyce began saying that things weren't the same. Tension was rising. Even some of her own family members, who had always been by her side, were now urging her to step away. The weight of the scandals, the media attention, and the legal issues had become too much. And the people around her, the ones who once believed she could weather anything, no longer seemed so sure. The isolation was setting in. Joyce had always been known for her strength, for pushing through pain, for getting back up no matter how hard she got knocked down. That was her brand, in a way. The survivor who turned trauma into triumph. But this time, something was different. She wasn't bouncing back with a new book or a fiery sermon. She was quiet, withdrawn, absent from the spotlight more and more. And when she finally did speak, when she announced her resignation, it wasn't bold or defiant. It was soft, tearful, careful. She didn't name names or directly address the scandals. She didn't call out her critics. She simply said she was tired, that she needed to step away, that it was time. To some, it felt like a graceful exit. To others, it felt like surrender. Meanwhile, Christian media, the same machine that had once celebrated her every move, moved on quickly. There were no tribute videos, no special send-offs, no loud public support. Instead, they shifted focus to other voices, younger preachers, newer names. Joyce Meyer had become old news, and, in some ways, bad news. That's the brutal part of public ministry in the media age. One day, you're on every screen, every book rack, every stage. The next, people act like they barely knew you. But maybe the hardest part wasn't losing the spotlight. It was losing the support of the people who had once stood beside her, the ones who had called her a friend, who had preached with her, prayed with her, built ministries alongside her. Sure. In the end, almost all of them were gone. Whether out of fear, disagreement, or simply self-preservation, they had walked away. And that's something money can't fix. When Joyce Meyer sat alone in front of the camera to announce she was stepping down, it wasn't just a personal decision. It was the final chapter of a long, slow fall from community, from unity, from belonging. It was the story of a leader who had once been at the center of something massive, now finding herself on the outside of the very world she helped build. The fallout didn't come with explosions. It came with distance, with people slipping away, with silence replacing loyalty. And for someone who had once been the face of faith for millions, that might be the most painful part of all. Whether Joyce will return, rebuild, or retreat permanently remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, in the world that once embraced her, she now stands alone. When Joyce Meyer stepped away from her ministry, it didn't feel like the end of just another chapter. It felt like the end of an era. For decades, she had been one of the most recognizable and influential voices in Christian media. Millions of people around the world had grown up listening to her sermons, reading her books, and watching her show, enjoying everyday life. Whether you agreed with her or not, her presence was everywhere. But now she's gone quiet, and the world is left wondering, is this really it? Joyce didn't walk off the stage with fire and drama. There was no major press conference, no bold final sermon, no long-winded explanation. Instead, it was quiet, emotional, heavy. Her resignation came with tears and a few carefully chosen words about needing rest, about feeling tired, about it being time to focus on her family. She didn't mention the lawsuits. She didn't talk about the scandals or the critics. She left a lot unsaid, and in doing so, left a lot of people guessing. Some people believe this is just a temporary pause, that she's taking time to regroup, clear her name, and then make a comeback. After all, Joyce Meyer has been through hard times before. Her entire career was built on the idea of surviving pain, rising from trauma, and using life's lowest moments as fuel to come back stronger. She's always preached resilience, and many of her followers still believe she's capable of another rise, that maybe this is just her wilderness season before a major return. But others aren't so sure. This time feels different. The controversies surrounding her, the financial questions, the lavish lifestyle, the insider accusations, weren't just rumors. They were detailed, public, and supported by former employees, legal documents, and investigative reporting. The stories of extravagant spending using ministry donations, the silence in the face of growing backlash, and the slow unraveling of trust have shaken her reputation in a way that might be hard to repair. It's not just about whether she can speak again, it's about whether people will listen. Joyce built her legacy on transparency. She told stories of pain, of abuse, of overcoming fear and rejection. That raw honesty was what made people connect with her. She wasn't perfect, and she never pretended to be, but she was real. And now, as people look back at everything she built, they're asking themselves a hard question. Was it real, or was it all part of the brand? Because when someone preaches about humility but lives in mansions, when someone teaches sacrifice but flies private, when someone says they're called to serve but seems to be profiting the most, it leaves people confused, disappointed, even betrayed. There are fans who still defend her. They say the attacks are unfair, that she's being judged too harshly, that no one truly knows what she's done behind the scenes to help people. They believe the media twisted the story and that Meyer is being punished for her success. For them, she's still the woman who brought them comfort in their darkest moments, the one who gave them hope when no one else could. But there's also a growing number of former followers who feel differently. For them, the silence, the lack of clear answers, is hard to ignore. If nothing was wrong, why not speak up? Why step down? Why now? This split in public opinion is exactly what puts Joyce Meyer's legacy in limbo. It's not fully ruined, but it's not fully intact either. It's stuck in between. People are reevaluating how they feel about her. Some are letting go, some are holding on, and others are just watching, waiting to see what happens next. In the world of faith-based leadership, legacy matters, not just because of the work done during someone's lifetime, but because of what they leave behind. Will their message carry on? Will people continue to believe in the values they preached, or will their name be tied more to controversy than to change? With Joyce, it's hard to say. Her ministry still exists. Her books are still in stores. Her videos still play online. But without her presence, something feels missing. She wasn't just the voice of the ministry. She was the identity. And without her at the center, everything feels a little unstable. Her team might try to keep things going. Maybe a family member will step in. Maybe a trusted figure will try to rebuild what's been lost. But can anyone really replace Joyce Meyer? Can anyone take the same platform and deliver the same message with the same weight? Probably not. And that's part of the problem. She didn't just build a ministry, she built a movement around herself. And when the leader of that movement steps down in silence, with questions swirling and supporters divided, it leaves a big hole, one that may never be fully filled. So, is this the end? Maybe. Maybe Joyce Meyer never steps behind a pulpit again. Maybe she fades out quietly, spending the rest of her life in private, surrounded by family, far from cameras and controversy. And maybe that's exactly what she needs. But maybe not. Maybe she returns someday with a new message. Maybe she owns her mistakes, addresses the past, and chooses to rebuild her reputation in a different way. Maybe she shifts focus, starts a new ministry, writes a book about everything she's learned, or takes on a role behind the scenes. It wouldn't be the first time a public figure has fallen and found their way back. Still, even if she does return, her legacy won't be the same. It will always come with an asterisk, a question mark. It will always live in the shadow of what happened in those final years. That's the price of public influence. When you lead millions, your fall is never quiet. But legacies aren't only about the end, they're about the whole story. And Joyce Meyer's story, no matter how it ends, is one that shaped the lives of countless people. Whether her name is remembered for her rise or her fall, her courage or her silence, her healing or her wealth, it will be remembered. Because you can't build an empire like she did and simply disappear, not without leaving something behind.